Hey everybody, let's take a look at topic number 12, Introduction to Decimals. So here, after we talked a little bit about whole numbers and fractions, so here we're going to begin to talk about decimals. So it might be decimal, operation of decimal is a little bit harder than fractions because fractions, inside the fraction, is always using whole numbers. Okay, that's why working with whole numbers is always a little bit easier as compared to working with decimals. That was just my point of view. All right. So before we talk about whole numbers, which is actually started with one, tens, hundreds, so on and so forth, right? So now we're going to begin to talk about the other side of the decimal point. So a lot of time decimal point is actually used for the word and. Okay. So a lot of time we use the word wrong, just like 401. Some people might say 401. So that word and is actually not used correctly. The word and, when we read a number, the word and is actually referring to as a decimal point. Okay, the first place to the right of the decimal point is always started with a tenth. Okay, not one. There's no one. Okay, that don't exist. All right, so we start with tenths, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, and 100,000, and so on and so forth. So basically, at the end, we're going to add the word THS. Okay, THS. All right. So let's look at some example. Write the following number in decimal notation. So we're going to read this and we're going to write down our decimal notation. Okay. Some of these can be a little bit tricky. All right. So the trick is, if you don't see the word and, that means these number we're going to write is on the right side of decimal points. So 5,300. So we write 53, right? Decimal point got to be, decimal point need to be in front of the 5 because, okay, the place value is always going to be where the last digit is sitting on. So the 3 right now is sitting on the 100 because this is 10th, then 100th. Okay, so the 3 is sitting on the 100th place. So that's how we know the decimal need to go in front of the 5. Therefore, the 5 is the 10th, the 3 is 100. So we read this as 5,300th. Okay, a little bit tricky. 73 and. So this word and is where my decimal is, right? So in front of the decimal, we got 73. To 73 and 341. Okay, so 341, normally we write like this, right? But we got to make sure the last digit 1 need to be sitting on the thousands. So if I write it this way, the 3 is on the 10th, 4 is on the 100th, and the 1 is sitting on the thousands. So I'm doing this correctly. Because if I would say 73 and 341, 10,000. If I say it like this, that means the 1 got to be now sitting on the 10,000th place. So that means 73 and 341. This 1 need to be located on the 10,000. Right now it is sitting on the 1,000, not 10,000. So how do I make this 1 sitting on 10,000? Well, by simply add a 0 in front of the 3, in between the decimal and the 3. Because now the 0 is the 10th, 3 is 100, 4 is thousands. Therefore, 1 will be on the 10,000th. So that's the trick. That's the tricky part. You gotta make sure that the last digit, okay, is sitting on the place value that you are saying. 15,000. Okay, so if you say 15,000, there's no and, so that means decimal right here in front of the 1. But if you put the decimal in front of the 1, that means 1 is the 10th, 5 is 100. But right now, the 5 need to be on the 10,000th place. So this is not correct. Okay, so how do I make sure the 5 is sitting on the 10, is sitting on the thousands? By simply adding a 0 right here. because if the 0 is in between the decimal and the 1, that means the 0 is the 10th, 1 is 100. Therefore, 5 is going to be what? On the thousands. Okay. All right. Write the following decimal number in words. Okay. So to know what place value to write, make sure you see what the last digit is sitting on. So 19, right? 19 decimal is the word and 102. And the 2 is sitting on the what? It's sitting on 10, 100,000. THOUSANDTHS. There you go. That's how we write it. All right. To read this properly. So the way we write it out is reading these decimal properly. Okay. This is actually 809. 9 is sitting on the thousands. So we will say 800. Can I say 809? And I'll be wrong. 809. And 9 is sitting on the what? Thousand. There you go. That's how you write them. Okay. If you can read this properly, if you can read decimal properly, okay, it's equivalent of actually writing decimal in terms of a fraction. Okay. I will give you a quick example right here. Okay. 0.2. If you read properly, 2 is sitting on the 10th. So you will read this as 2 tenths. Well, 2 tenths is the same as 2 tenths. So 0.2 is the same as 2 over 10, which we can reduce it as 1 over 5. Okay, so that's how we actually convert a decimal to a fraction, by simply reading it properly. So I think there's a topic I'm going to introduce about how you convert them from decimal to fraction. Now, convert fraction back to a decimal, we will simply divide. Okay, so we'll talk more about that later. Another objective I want to go over is rounding. Okay, so please make sure. Okay, always make sure we locate the digit that needs to be rounded. Okay, once a digit is located, the digit to the right will determine whether we should go up or stay the same. So 0.296, I need to round to the nearest hundredth. So who is on the hundredth? 2 is tenth. 9 is hundredth, right? I need to round 9. My 6 will make my 9 go up. So that becomes 10. So the 2 will also go up. So that will become 0.3, right? No, because 0.3 only indicates I'm rounding to the nearest tenth, not hundredth. So I have to put a 0 there to demonstrate that I am rounding to the nearest hundredth. So the correct answer is actually 0.30. All right, round to the nearest whole number or round to the nearest ones is referring to the ones position. Okay, so the digit to the right of my ones position is 4. 4 will make my 1 stay the same. So my answer is about 701. Okay, round to near 10,000. So let's count them. First place to the right of decimal is tenth, 10, 100,000, 10,000. So now I need to round 6. So a lot of students say, oh, 6 is bigger than 5. I round up. Nope, that's not correct. You got to look at the digit to the right of it. It's a 2. 2 will make my 6 stay the same. So my answer should be 3.8376. Okay, 3 in 8,376 10,000. All right, let's look at some of these problems on the homework. All right, when writing decimal number in words, decimal point is equivalent to what word? Decimal point got to be referring to what? The word and. All right, write the following number in decimal. So be careful, okay? This 9 need to be sitting on the hundredth, right? 27 and 91 thousandths. So 91,000. right? The 1 right now is actually not sitting on the thousands. So what do you do to make the 1 sitting on the thousand? You know what I'm saying? So you have to add a what? Add a 0 in between what? The decimal and the 9. So that will push the 1 onto the thousandth place. All right, the last two questions, another two question is simply write these in in words. So make sure you use the word "and" correctly. Okay. So this last number, so this first one will be 296. What place is 6? What place will be 6 on? 10, 100, what? 1,000. 701 and 41. 1 is sitting on what place value? 41, what? 100. Okay. All right. Rounding. I have one problem with rounding, and I'm being tricky about it. Well, I want you to round to nearest hundredth. So the 9 is 10th. 8 is not, the next 9 is what? 100th. So the 8 will make your 9 go up. So if you simply say 4, that would be a wrong answer, because when you say 4, you're not showing me what? The 100th place. So you have to put the zeros back in there. Okay. So hopefully this introduction of decimal makes a little bit sense on rounding and writing some of decimals in words and reading some of the words and then write the decimal number. All right, that will conclude this video. Thank you for watching.